Good evening and welcome to the CEPT Essay Prize event. We have a slightly larger crowd than the rest of the years, so I think one has to thank Paromita for it, because it's always a filmmaker who attracts a lot more crowd than... so thank you. I am Seema Khanwalkar, a faculty from the Faculty of Design, CEPT University. So today we are here to honor all the winners of the Essay Prize 21-22 and to release the next year's theme and also to release the book. I would also like to sort of explain the process of the Essay Prize so that there are potential participants sitting out here who will, sort of participate in the next year's competition, hopefully. So I'd like to, I'm sure all of you know that last year's theme was embellishment. And I would like to begin with a quote by Ada Louise Huxtable, who's an architectural critic. And I quote, "Embellishment is an irresistible and consuming impulse. Going back to the beginnings of human history, probably the strongest motivating force is the simplest, the inability of almost everyone to leave well enough alone," unquote. Today is special in so many different ways. We're here in person, having survived a devastating pandemic, to felicitate young minds who braved through the theme in so many different circumstances. I'm sure they've had personal, they've seen different contexts around them. So congratulations to all the winners, the finalists, and to all those who participated in the Essay Prize in these really tough times. The CEPT Essay Prize, just a short introduction, was instituted in an office at CEPT in 2018 by Professor Srivatsan, Kaivan Mehta, and myself. And it was in keeping with our president, Bimal Patel, who had introduced this larger vision of CEPT University, intensifying its focus on writing as a means to clarify our thoughts as designers. The conscious decision to focus on South and Southeast Asia was deliberate and well thought out. I cannot emphasize how pleased we are at CEPT to see it grow into an international competition with entries coming in from Canada, US, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Australia, and now Johannesburg. And needless to say, different corners of our own country. Especially this time round, we had essays coming in from corners of Maharashtra, which was absolutely delightful to know and to feel. So the CEPT Essay Prize team feels particularly elated when we get entries from smaller cities in India, because that's the reach we hope with every theme we hope to reach larger pockets of our country. One of us, Kaivan Mehta, who's now in Mumbai as the Dean of the Balwant Sheth Architecture in Narsi Monji, is deeply missed today. We would like to thank him for his unbounded energy and wonderful discussions that we had for 4 precious years. We are extremely happy to welcome one of our very own, Manasi Shah, a faculty at CEPT and an urban designer, to our team that we hope grows younger with her presence. The Essay Prize is a collaborative effort, and it's a lot of fun. Like a family that discusses all aspects of coffee, so generously and graciously hosted by our provost, Tridip. Namrata Shah, who heads the publications division at CEPT University, also joined us a year ago. So we are like a new team again, but the essence is still there. Making it a complete picture with publications, the communications team, thank you Hemant, faculty and the administration, everybody giving the Essay Prize the vital energy that it requires. The Essay Prize goes through 2 rounds of review processes. The first round, after selection of abstracts, is reviewed by an internal team of faculty who choose the essays for clarity of purpose, thematic relevance, and promise. Rutul Joshi, Sonal Mittal, Katrinel Danka, and Kanika Singh from Ashoka University have been our backbone for this round, for this first review round for the past 4 years, and we are really blessed to have their support. After the essays are written by the selected candidates, the final jury, comprising of Tridip Surhud, Romi Khosla, and Qazi Khalid Ashraf from Bangladesh, select the finalists on the basis of the essay prize parameters to select the first 3 winners, and also the 13 essays that are included in our book every year. These scores are collated, compared, and analyzed by the team to give the best their due. So after a whole year's engagement with the process, we come together, like today, to felicitate our winners. So, I mean, it is a long 6 to 7 month process, and I think, after this, the winners really deserve what, we are about to give them. So wait till the end, don't leave, especially to all those who are sitting in the back and waiting to slink away, right? So without much ado, I would like to begin the proceedings for today by inviting our special guest speaker, filmmaker and writer, Paromita Vohra, to come up on stage to felicitate the winners. I would also like to invite Tridip Surhud and Chirayu Bhatt to come and please give away the prizes. So we would like to announce the honorary mention first. Isha Choksi, a CEPT alumni who is unfortunately not here with us today, who's a versatile architect and scholar with specialization in architectural history. A round of applause for her, please. Would you like to say a thank you on her behalf?
Isha is our senior, and on her behalf, I am pleased to receive the award. Thanks a lot to CEPT and all the organizers.
Thank you. Thank you. The second prize winner is here with us, again a CEPT alumni from Urban Design. She's currently exploring theatre, fiction, and non-fiction narrative writing. I welcome Khushali Haji. Sorry. I'm so sorry. Khushali, would you like to say a few words? Please.
I didn't know I could do this, but yes, I definitely want to thank all the women who gave me their stories to use so that I could make this. So really, this is for them. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, and last but not the least, the winner of the 21-22 essay prize is Zoshil Narayan, an architect based in Johannesburg, where he mainly works on social housing and settlement upgrade projects. Of course, he can't travel from there, but we are happy to have his video.
I am the nuance of color that is embodied in people and landscapes. I am the appearance of ownership and reclamation. I am the facade of undoing through redoing. I am the cyanide and sulfur, the tuberculosis it brings, the displacement and the disposition. I am the matrix of boundary lines. I am the mechanic of extraction of ground and people. I am the provider of survivor space and perseverance space. I am the gene of hereditary tragedy, and I am an assassin truth. I am structural violence. I am structural endurance. I am Johannesburg. Hello all, my name is Joshua Narayan, and that was a short excerpt from my essay submission. I'm an architect based in Johannesburg, South Africa, and I work for 2 companies, namely Albanico Sac Metacity, as well as 2610 South Architects, with my day-to-day focus being on social housing and informal settlement upgrade projects. Firstly, I'd like to thank the conveners and the administration for continuing with the CEPT essay competition, despite the complexity of COVID that affected everyone in 2021. Secondly, I would like to congratulate my fellow contestants and colleagues who have been shortlisted and who are being published. Well done to everyone who participated. My essay, titled The Violence in Value, a meditation on apartheid in Johannesburg, and the contemporary perpetuation of it through racial embellishment, is a collection of experiences, criticisms, and considerations about Johannesburg, and reconsiders the absolutes of what's wrong and right as an exploration of complexity that entangled the meaning behind navigating Johannesburg post-1994. The process of writing the essay allowed me the opportunity to critically consider my immediate environment and read meaning into implicit forms of racism that apartheid continues to mask itself under. It allowed me to connect the string that ties the cosmos to the subterranean and the colonial to my lived experience. In my critique of the extreme embellishment of the city, I drew from the variety of violence both implicitly and explicitly extruded from such forms of embellishment through examples like the area in which I stay, named Lenasia. Lenasia was a group area designated for Indian people to stay within under the apartheid regime. I considered how my community, in response to increase in crimes and rioting, began the nesting of group areas within a group area by gating of portions as a means to control movement and provide the necessary surveillance and security that eases the minds of anxious community members. Yet it simultaneously provides the same apartheid-like urbanism that restricts freedom of movement and uses the same appearance criteria to judge who has and who does not have access, amongst other forms of embellishment like the representation of indigenous and local identity through commercial architecture, beauty, and identity, as well as safety and security, becomes tools from which the core values of apartheid continue to be perpetuated. I hope the essay provides an insight into a shared experience of the complexity that Johannesburg and at large South Africa is engaged with. It also forefronts the notion of what architects and urban designers ought to critically consider in their own approach to practice. And finally, I hope it allows us to inwardly examine our experience of our surrounds and understand its ability to exist simultaneously within its structural violence and structural endurance. Thank you.
I would now like to invite Chirayu Tridip and to release the essay prize book, please. 22 essay prize book. So this is a collection of 13 essays which were chosen from all the essays that were carefully reviewed, copy edited, and absolutely stunning essays that we received this year. So I request you all to purchase a copy and keep it as your collection. I'm also marketing it. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So.
Yeah, yeah.
About the next year's theme and for the next round of the essays. Paromita? Yes. No, you just open it and I'll read it from here. So the next year's theme is called The Architecture of Thrill, Design in the Age of Artificial Intelligence. As a team, we felt that the design futures in the age of AI has to be a theme that needs to be addressed, written about, critiqued, read and understood, even if it is the inevitable in our future. So we invite our future writers. Some of you are here. and to participate in the 22-23 theme with a lot of interest in deep thinking. The word thrill is deliberate to give a spin and mystery around our position as a CEPT Essay Prize team. So, you know, we're really looking forward to a post-pandemic set of fabulous essays coming from you all. So thank you everyone, and now for the parts that we are all eagerly waiting for. I'm sure you all are saying now, Seema, get off the stage and let's get Paromita on board, right? So the public lecture that CEPT Essay Prize organizes every year to honor the winners, and for young students, we strive to keep the Essay Prize event a very thoughtful evening by inviting some of the most creative, influential writers, filmmakers, novelists, and those who wield the power of the pen. And who are a force in their own right. Today we have with us Paromita Vohra, who is a filmmaker and writer whose work explores feminism, love and desire, urban life and popular culture. Most of you are already aware of her, have read her, who are following her on Instagram and on the social media and in the newspapers and her films. Her work has been broadcast and is taught internationally and exhibited at the National Gallery of Modern Art, the Tate Modern, and the Wellcome Trust. She's the founder and creative director of Agents of Ishq, India's best-loved website about sex, love, and desire. I don't think I need to say more about her or her contributions, and let her talk speak for itself. I invite Paromita Vohra.
Thank you very much to everybody at CEPT, especially Seema, for having me here. I'm so envious of you guys because you get to have things like this essay contest and other stuff that we never had growing up. Otherwise, I'm sure we would have been more intelligent than we turned out to be. But yes. Some of you might already know the theme of my talk is about our digital selves and the possibilities for those digital selves in the digital worlds we inhabit. And how elusive pleasure sometimes seems to be in it, although it is supposed to be always around us. And because it's to talk about selves, and because now I'm over 50, I feel okay to talk about myself a little bit. That's how I'll start. No, otherwise you get very annoyed, you know, when speakers would speak about themselves, I'd be like, oh, what a pompous drone, but we all get there. So, you know, I was a grown-up when the internet came into our homes. And I always say that the internet actually helped me to have a youth, because I wasn't really a person who fitted in easily when I was a kid and a young person. I lived in different places. I was a fat kid, I was a bookish kid, I was also a strange kid, a bit tortured, a bit clueless. And I always found it hard to find a space that I fitted in, and a space that I felt was made for me. Which is why, like many such people, I haunted libraries. And the front seat of the university special bus. Those people who are from Delhi know that the uncool kids sit in the front of the bus, right? The cool kids are all over the rest of the bus. So that's who I was at that place and time. But this idea of who are we? Who are we is a question that animates us as long as we live. It's a question that we confront many times over. And at least one definition of freedom, I think, is that every time we ask this question, who are we are able to respond to it a bit differently. Because the world is always trying to fix us, right? In a demographic, in a psychographic, in an identity, in a category of some kind. And I think our ability to exceed that category, exceed that box, to be that thing plus something, is roughly freedom, but also that is where personhood lives, right? And so I think it's important to have the possibility to reflect on this question, who am I? A space in which to do it. It's a political necessity. And I think it's a political question because the question, who am I, also is about reflecting on who am I in relationship to others, and therefore who are these others, right? So for all of these reasons, I feel that the answers to the question can only partially be articulated in identities. In practice, it needs other kinds of spaces, and it needs what I like to call a poetic privacy. It's not always a verbal space, it's an intuitive, experiential space, which is as deep and mysterious as a pool in a painting, in which we intuit our desires and make meaning of our experiences. What happens in this space of privacy? I'll give you one story about it. When I got my first internet connection in 1998, this is one of the spaces I found. As I've already mentioned that my youth sucked, but since I was a grown-up, I lived more than half of the life I have lived so far at the time that I got my internet connection. But the internet became a place of deep sensuality for me, a place of random encounters with art and ideas, and of course, sexuality and sexualness. It became a portal to articulation which was not so easily available to me in the social structures that I had so far inhabited. And I think one of the important things about the internet at that time was that it was extremely marginal. There were very few people online, and because I was a certain type of person, a young woman working, living alone, I could afford that luxury, right? But I was one amongst very few people with that kind of a connection. People thought it was a little sleazy to be online, to be in chat rooms, to be doing God knows what you're doing online all the time, right? Already at that time, even when the internet had very little audio visuality. But I think it was a space to just amble, go to unknown places. There was no plan, there was no guidance, there was no direction, there was no intent or agenda. So it was a lot of time pass that you could do. And I would say that what it offered therefore was pleasure, like deep, unadulterated pleasure, right? And pleasure, as we know, is a very dubious category, because although people always say pleasure is a good thing, but then they immediately tell you it's superfluous. I mean, I really like it that I'm doing this talk for the felicitation of a book on embellishment, because that idea that it's just something extra. Pleasure is not, it's a waste of time. You should really be doing something else. And if you submit too much to pleasure, it will take you very far away. You will get carried away, but we don't know where you will get carried away to. You cannot imagine also the particular luxury and beauty of this pleasure and waste of time in a newly globalizing India, where everybody was trying to do an MBA, right? So that there's a kind of non-productive impulse in spending so much time on the internet. And for me, actually, this purposeless and very ornamental and completely private journey, this privacy of this time, culminated in a new articulation for myself, as an artist and as a person. I think that this digital space became one of reflection that articulated new creative and political language for me. And I'm going to show you a clip from a film that I made around that time. In 2002, I made this film called Unlimited Girls. It's a film about feminism. I'll show you a clip, and it follows the explorations and adventures of a young woman called Fearless, whom we never actually fully see. We just see her in fragments. And she's trying to understand what feminism means. So,
It's been one of those times, a season of discontent. I've been feeling alone and adrift and doubting the choices which have made up my life. Days are still and restless. Not many answers blowing in the wind are there, Bob. And I don't know about you, but when I'm not sure what I'm looking for, I look for, well, okay, love. You think it's an escape? Oh, come now. Let's just call it a little diversion from the more complicated questions about life.
After no action for ages, I meet this really attractive man, but we don't agree on a single political issue. What do I do? Forget him?
If you had asked me this question 10 years ago, I would have said yes, but today
If
I
she
don't
keeps
know.
waiting for the politically correct man, she'll have a long wait. Forever.
It's just that he's so romantic. Like, he called me at 2 a.m. to say he was thinking of me.
Romantic? I think it's highly inconsiderate.
He's so romantic. What does romantic mean? It's just the same bullshit.
Any girl here for a hot chat?
We want to be treated like idiots, like bimbos, but we pretend we are not.
See, I know it's not the thing to say, but I really don't want to end up alone.
Is that the worst possible fate? Alone can mean different things at different times, no?
I don't know if anything can change the meaning of being alone. Aloneness is a state of mind which does not necessarily have to do with ideology, although...
If you obsess about ideology in a love chat room, I can see why you have a problem with romance.
Love? This is a feminist chat room, Fearless.
But it's called allyouneedisLove.com.
So,
Girls, PM me for sexy chat.
Oh boy, what's a nice girl like me doing in a place like this?
You aren't a feminist.
I see you believe in the direct approach, which must make you one.
And you?
I don't know if I would call myself one. Too much of a label.
I don't get it.
If I call myself a feminist, it defines me. Not by my own definition, but other people's. Someone else decides what I am like.
Feminism is a process, not an identity or label. I won't be defined, I'll be described.
That's the philosophy, and I can relate to it. But in practice, doesn't it really become about joining a group and meeting agendas?
Groups are important for making change on a wider level.
But can you really change people by scolding them in groups?
Can you change them just by setting a good example?
Okay, one sec. Don't get me wrong. I understand I owe many of my freedoms and choices to feminism, and I believe in the principles.
But won't risk calling yourself one. What do you think you will lose?
That same freedom of thought, the freedom to be confused, to see things in many ways.
What's the difference between openness and merely keeping your options open?
good old-fashioned cop-out.
Please, this is the black and white thing I mean. One difference of opinion and bingo, you're a hero or villain.
What you are saying is, feminism works for you, and that's enough. But is it?
You got me there. If I say yes, I'm selfish. If I say no, well, what's my choice then? Or will you punish me, Mark?
You can watch the film online if you feel interested. It's a very long film, so I just wanted to give you a glimpse of the... I mean, the thing is, it's not just that the film... First of all, it was one of the early documentaries in India that was made on digital video. So it was, of course, digital in that way. And yes, it had a chat room. But what I really want to say is that the digital is also a language, right? It's a form. The digital self doesn't come into being only because there is digital technology. But the self is digital at some level or the other. And I think that what that kind of aimless time spent online helped me to articulate was that one could have a form that had multiple windows. Actually, what was different about Unlimited Girls as a documentary film was that it mixed fiction, non-fiction. In fact, when you look at the internet today, Unlimited Girls is pretty much like a compressed version of the internet now, which had sketches and spoofs, and it was a lot of like what in Bombay we call bhankas, along with a lot of serious conversations and this kind of a very polyglot space. But I think of it as many, many windows that are open at the same time, and you're entering from one window into another one, and you are actually simultaneously having pleasure, having seriousness, having an interest in something, learning about something, fooling around. Like there's a lot of making friendships, arguing with people, coming back again and again. And the reason why I found this form to be really very fitting for a film on feminism is because I had spent a lot of time reading many, many transcripts of conferences and conversations. And the one thing that I took away from it was that the feminist movement was about this endless conversation, that people fought with each other, but they came back because they were really passionate about this idea that was helping them define themselves. So in that sense, I think digitality kind of allowed me to map the idea of the many selves that we are onto a film form. And when I say it helped me to find a new political voice, I really mean that in documentary especially, but not only documentary, because documentary illustrates a certain way of thinking. The idea of what is political and how we are political was fixed, right? You made a kind of linear film about certain types of topics with a certain mannerism in it. And then the audience also was going through the ritual of watching it and feeling we are politically progressive. So there was a side binary in that way of speaking. And I think what I was searching for was to design a form that wasn't so broadcast oriented, which would be open-ended and allow the filmmaker and the audience to be at the same plane and engage in a conversation. You may not agree with everything, but you might agree with something, so that it was not an all or nothing form. I really wanted to find that what is today called interactive, but an interactivity that was built into the form in a way, right? So I think that is what that time online allowed me to do, but it's not only about being online. The online allowed that articulation, but obviously those feelings were bubbling up for a long time, just couldn't find a way to say it. And it is because I think that idea of pleasure, which is so superfluous, is actually very essential to the way that we make sense of the world and the way we get confidence in our sense making of the world, right? Because it is eventually sensory, the way that we make sense of things. And I think, you know, in later films, because of shortness of time, I don't think I can show you too many clips, but in later films, what it allowed me to do also was that, say, I made a film on public toilets. I'm going to show you a very short clip from it. And my editor and I had a lot of fights about this clip, which is why I'm showing you.
उसके ध्यान में रख करके साइकोलॉजिकल मनोवैज्ञानिक के रूप से हम लोगों ने यूरिनल को फ्री रखा।
तो जेंट्स के लिए यूरिनल्स होते हैं, मगर लेडीज़ के लिए यूरिनल्स?
लेडीज़ के लिए भी यूरिनल्स उसी में रहता है, लेडीज़ सेक्शन में।
और मैंने तो हमेशा पे किया है सुलभ में।
नहीं तो आप पे अपने खुद करती होंगे, वो लोग कुछ भी करती हैं, बोलती यूरिनल जाएंगे तो उनको हम 4 मिनट करते हैं।
Welcome to the Toilet Museum. This section has different dates which are milestones in the development of toilet system, mainly in Europe. It was in Paris for the first time male and female toilets were separated.
But then what were they doing before the separation?
What they were doing before the separation, very interesting question. In England, what happened that whenever there was a ball or some dance party, in front of the hall there was a small garden everywhere. So suppose if a lady had to go just to pee, she will go in the garden, move here and there and do it somewhere. But if somebody asks, where are you going? She will say that I am going to pluck roses. So there is a phrase in England that to pluck roses means go to pee. That they will do behind any bush, behind any cover.
So the thing is, Mr. Jha is obviously a very likable man, right? Like he's very entertaining to watch. But the thing that my editor and I fought about was the opening shot where he's eating an apple on top of that Louis XIV toilet, which he shows us later in the sequence, right? And she kept saying it's not necessary. Why do you want it there? And at the end, I just said, well, because I really like it. But the thing is that you start laughing when you see him eating that apple on the toilet. And after that, I think it disarms you. It makes you open. And it allows you to see this person just as the people who live in the world of toilets. And what is their spirit? Because, of course, toilets are a matter of urban planning. Of course, there's gender, caste, and other things involved. But there are also all these kinds of people who are involved in trying to do this. They are not perfect. Obviously, Sulabh is not a perfect example. But to take it away from the binary of perfect or not perfect, or I'm going to denounce it because it's X, Y, Z, or I'm going to uphold it because it's done this, it helps you to bring it down to a human level. And it helps you to see it a little bit for what it is in context without having to sign up in the pro or anti-Sulabh army in a way, right? So I think that this language, in other films, it allowed me to include songs which supposedly make a film less rational, which was a kind of conversation about Bollywood that you would hear around you. So it also allows you to reclaim these pleasures that are part of popular life in a way and open up the political landscape of the film. But I think any language, if you cannot fix it and say that this language is innately progressive, right? After some time it gets a fixity and you have to continuously even change your own language depending on the context. And today we do find ourselves in a very different digital moment, right, on the internet. I think the question is what happens to us when the internet becomes equated with social media? Because the internet is no longer actually that kind of like, Wild West, कि कहीं भी जा रहे हैं, कुछ भी कर रहे हैं. It is social media. That is what we think of when we think of the internet. And though there are questions of corporate ownership and political censorship involved in social media, I'm not talking about those. I am interested again in thinking, what does it mean that what is the form of social media doing to us? On the one hand, I think we cannot deny that social media amplifies many things. It does give space to many things we wouldn't hear in the mainstream otherwise. It allows us to express many things about ourselves. The selfie itself, which was always looked down on by everybody. But I do think it allowed a lot of different kinds of people to say, it's okay to be photographed. I was definitely one of those people who never wanted to be photographed because I thought, oh, I'm not good looking. But the selfie actually helped me to develop a different relationship with my own appearance too. So I can see that there was a lot of interactivity with the self that social media allows and communities that form. But nevertheless, I think we have to be cognizant of the fact that the way that social media is designed as completely modular and an endless scroll means that it compels us into a homogeneity and a conformity. Right? And the algorithms of social media, of course, they are not written in stone. They can be changed by our behavior, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But it enjoins on you the idea that you can be important, and that the people that which started out being your connections, that's how social media termed them, are now followers. So the very fact that you will accumulate followers and you will be broadcasting to followers, and that if you wish to have success on social media, you can be in the creator economy, as they say, and then you can actually become a brand. So it compels each person to think of themselves as a brand and to continuously play themselves out and perform that singular brand, rather than this kind of very polyphonic existence which is natural to human beings and which the internet kind of allowed us to be when society didn't always allow it so easily, right? And I think the most important thing that social media asks of us is that we should be legible. It should be very clearly understandable. There should be no confusion. What your message is, what type of person who you are, what is your aesthetic, everything about you should be known. And therefore I would like to ask the question here of what happens to privacy, and the idea of the private space which is very fertile, in which we grow. And again, I think privacy gets often conflated with secrecy or with being solitary. But that is not what privacy is, right? It's also a continuum. Our relationships with others may be private. Some thoughts may be private. There may be things we don't even know that are going on in our privacies that we want to allow to be there without always having to exhibit them or have them scrutinized. But the conflation of public and personal on social media, that you yourself are the content, and that you must always put yourself out by saying something personal, means that you get fixed in that moment. And you do it at the cost of your privateness, right? Because social media defines privacy actually as property. Your data is private and I will mine it from you. But privacy is not only property. Actually, it is a kind of landscape that all human beings need to inhabit. And one could think about a person as somebody who exists in a three-part space, right? A tripartite space, the public, the private, and the personal. And the personal being that kind of conduit between the private and the public, continuously reshaping each other. So the importance of the private in human existence, I think, is something that artists have to design for. And so that, in this kind of world of listicles and telling you how to be, the idea that politics can be fixed, I think it's not different than what I was saying about the documentary film before, that there's a fixed form. This is what it means to be political. These are your identities that are political identities or not, and everything is binary. Everything is liberal or conservative, right or wrong, moral or immoral, perpetrator or victim. Either you have had trauma or you have overcome trauma. So what is actually the space to shift between these different spaces and grow? And like, how can vulnerability be a journey that you go through in order to reach somewhere else and not a permanent fixed position that you're in, right? How do you unfix that which social media insists you should be in? I think that this idea of being yourself is something that is very much promoted on social media. And we seem to be very self-obsessed on social media. But I want to argue that we are in fact not self-obsessed enough. That all our self-obsession is for the outward world, right? We are very dependent, we are outward facing and dependent on the validation of the outside world, rather than turning inwards and looking for our own meanings and making our own meanings. So there's this kind of a confusion about what we are and what is private that social media form engenders, and I think we do need to, I worry about it. I don't want to be trapped in it, that's for sure. And I question what it means for somebody who might have grown up only in that context. Like, how do they find a language out of it, right? Because in this, even your political activity can be only as a liker, a follower, or a retweeter, right? It's very difficult to have any other political activity. So I think that you can we shift this? I think you can shift it because algorithms can be changed. If you think of gender, for example, as an algorithm, gender tells you what you should be, male or female, means man or woman, means you should live in this way and this heteronormative life, etc. But we are all the time changing the meaning of gender by just small things that we do, which accumulate into a new meaning of gender. So I think we can also change many things online, at least as artists, I feel we can. And I think that Agents of Ishq, which is a project that I started around 7 years ago, was very much an effort to think about what you can do online, which is not determined by the online, but tries to determine the online to some extent. To use the online as a space and a place to create language, rather than be trapped in its predetermined languages, right? So for those who don't know Agents of Ishq, it's a website, a platform, digital platform about sex, love, and desire for Indians. Obviously not only for Indians because it's online, but it has a very Indian focus. And to speak about what social media discourse does to people, for example, this piece that came into Agents of Ishq, where the person talks about how the conversation around red flags and toxic relationships is so decontextualized that you start feeling anxious about what might be your completely okay love relationship or a complex process in your love relationship, and you're not able to trust your own self and your own feminism, right? Makes you feel like a bad feminist. So Agents of Ishq was created to work against the modularity of the online space. It was designed anti-modular. That's why it has a lot of handmade, at a simple level, a lot of handmade drawings, because the internet forces you into this mechanistic aesthetic. It's laborious, of course, to do work in this way, but it creates beauty, it creates individuality, it creates friendliness, and it makes you feel like it's a person, though it's not a person, right? We also draw very much on this idea of the life world, that all of us are a swirling mass of influences. It's not like we are one fixed category of person, but every second we are changing. We are changing through different things entering us and our own impact on those things. So being part of the culture, in a sense, rather than wanting to be a broadcast reform movement of sex positivity, which is what Instagram allows you to be, right? Be a sex positive sexuality influencer and tell everybody how you will be uplifted by embracing sex positivity, as opposed to Agents of Ishq, which is let's see what we want to talk about, we don't have any decided agenda. I think one of the interesting things is that when we started Agents of Ishq, the idea of how do you create that same question that I had in the making of Unlimited Girls, which had to be answered differently. How do you create a space where people can enter and co-create the conversation with you rather than you determining the conversation? And I'm going to do a quick rundown of the ways in which we did it. One is, I think you need to find an inclusive frame if you want to invite people in. And the frame that we found was Ishq. We are very lucky to have the word Ishq, which everybody knows and nobody really can define, but everybody kind of gets it because it's a mixture of love and sex. It means desire. It doesn't mean one or the other. So it's already an inclusive frame. When you say Agents of Ishq, you're already saying we are not the only guys. All of you are Agents of Ishq. And from the day that the website was launched, we started getting emails from people saying, I too want to be an Agent of Ishq. And they all had their own definition of what it means to be an Agent of Ishq, right? And each of those definitions, as they entered the space, actually have changed the space slowly over time. Now, it's not a passive experience in which we just receive what people are sending. It's an active artistic engagement, right? We are continuously designing conversations, but we are also being designed by the conversations that come to us. So I think it really offers a fantastic opportunity to co-create a space, to create an open-ended space that can continuously grow along with its audience, right? So It's co-owned. I won't say it's totally owned by the users, but it's co-owned in some sense, and I've learned a lot from it. Of course, it's playful. The way that I spend so much time doing faltugiri on the internet, there's a lot of faltugiri on Agents of Ishq. One of our most popular engagements is Bad Poetry Day. On that day, people just write bad poems on our Instagram, and it's just a way to have fun together for no purpose except to have fun together, which is a very big purpose, actually. I mean, it builds a completely different sense of community to do that, right? I think it's very interesting that people send us very complex kind of essays. We have never put out a theme. We have never asked people to write about anything particular, but people know, here is a space in which I can be confused and work out my confusions. So I think that this non-verbal communication that pleasure allows for is indeed very open-ended, and it often feels scary because it can't be counted or it can't be verified like a blue tick. But I do believe that if you go with it, it takes you somewhere really special, right? I think what it leads to, of course, is that, for instance, this map of India, right? A KISS map of India. Now, it was done during the Kiss of Love campaign. So there was a kind of political intent in it to say that, yes, of course, kissing is part. If there are words for kiss, then it must be part of Indian culture. But the thing is, it's not a binary approach, right? Like, I call this approach thinking in threesomes. Like, everything doesn't have to be a binary. There can be some other way of talking about this, which is an open-ended, not an army approach, but a community approach in a way, which allows for heterogeneity to coexist. This is a very popular map. You can buy a mug or a print of it if you like from our website. Similarly, we also created a queer map of Bombay, in which we asked queer people what are the important spaces in the city. So it became a map which is geographical as well as historical, right? Because it is over time. And that too is it's a very popular thing that people want to have. And the amazing thing about it is that you can continuously add to it because it's online. And that other people can make a map of their cities if they want to. So we changed the meaning of a city map altogether, if we like. It also led to a huge archive of experiential kind of accounts of people's own personal lives. Very, very candid, very, very unexpected, not fitting in any category of, regressive or progressive, just how people have lived their intimate lives. And I think it has become, in that sense, an archive not only of shared wisdom, which is like where the community is learning from each other, not from us, not even learning, but feeling, okay, it's okay, everybody's experiences are complex. But it's also bringing to light something outside the binaries of straight and gay and, the progressive binaries that we also all inhabit. They get broken by people talking about how they have felt and experienced things. Even trans experience, not to fit into category, but to talk about dating, to allow people to decide what it is that they want to speak about from their position, is kind of a beautiful experience. It's like planting a very beautiful garden, but a little bit haphazardly, so different things can grow in it that you don't know. Yeah? And it has allowed, like I said, this kind of unexpected theorization, a different theoretical framework for talking about love and sex, talking about law, rape, justice, everything, everything that is not politically correct. I'm going to end with a song because it's always best to do that. Erase any memories of boredom from the speaker, but I only want to show a little part of this because I think like this thing of speaking in threesomes. We made this film on consent. It's a Lavani. Lavani is an erotic dance form from Maharashtra. We wrote it along with the performers and some people they work with. And consent is like a cup of tea is a very popular video, which I deeply hate. Because I feel like we talk about sex in analogies. We don't talk about sex as a landscape. If you ask me what is sex education, I will always respond with sex is the education, right? Sex is the education on gender, on power dynamics, on emotion, on so many things about ourselves. And so I think that we should talk about consent in the context of sex, not in the context of tea. I don't even drink tea. So I'll be like totally ruled out of the consent argument then. So when we made, one of the reasons why we made the film with the Lavani dancers is because also Lavani is a form steeped in pleasure. And the women are enacting, and there's a complexity about their identity, of course, because they're performing for men in certain ways, but they're enacting a woman who can desire. So if you start from the position, first of all, that women are desiring beings, you're already breaking that binary of women don't desire, only men desire, and then women either give consent or don't give consent. But you're saying it's a dynamic of mutuality. But the most, I think, landmark thing we did in this video is it was not a video about yes means yes and no means no. It's a video about the yes, no, and maybe of consent. And this third place, the maybe, where we make up our minds, which is privacy, poetry, spirituality, religion, all of those spaces, the space of maybe are the space of privacy, which is where we change, actually, where change is viable in a sense, was something that we explored. And I think that also made it inclusive. It allowed the conversation to grow rather than be fixed, right? So,
म्हणून सांगते जेव्हा म्हणायचं हो तेव्हा हो नको ते नको
पर आपली आपल्यालाच खात्री नसते तेव्हा कधी वाटतं हो कधी वाटतं नाही तेव्हा काय करायचं ग
मे बी
पण ते पुरुषांना कुठं समजतंय
ज्याला समजतं तो हिरो नाही समजला तो झिरो हा पाहुणा कुठून तरी आला मी भुलले त्याच्या कच्चा अंगाला तो म्हणला चल माझ्या संगा चल उधळूया इश्काचे रंग मी म्हणले बेबी 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 मी म्हणले बेबी 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 बेबी
अगे ह्या लोकांना मे बी म्हणजे होच वाटतं
तो म्हणाला
Of course. I can wait for you, baby.
वाव म्हणजे त्याला तुझा पॉइंट मिळाला
भेटला हो जरा पॉइंट माझा शेवटी भेटला हो जरा पॉइंट माझा शेवटी भेटला हो जरा पॉइंट माझा
this video is also online, so you can watch the whole of it. It's a very entertaining video. Yeah. So I just want to close by saying that, it's very common to get into this doomsday conversation about, oh, social media is doing this to us, is doing that to us. But social media is doing to us what the world always does, right? Like it takes the energies of people, of artists, of our desires, it consolidates them, and it fixes them in one place for power. And we cannot fall victim to the idea that we have to talk about politics only in terms of power. We have to talk about politics in terms of our desires, about what it is that we want out of life. And I think our work as designers, architects, writers, artists, is to think about what can we do to foster spaces and design spaces that actually enrich the private world, that give space to this politics of desire and to politics itself in that sense of being, rather than fall victim to being just a follower of the politics of power and its very fixed languages. So thank you very much for listening to me.
Well, that was Paromita in her essence and Paromita in her true form as an agent of ishq. So thank you so much. That was absolutely scintillating. I think I used the right word for you when I described you to people. Before I forget, we have two people from the CEPT Prize, Dhruv Pandya and Smita Patil, who are here today. And Smita, please stand up and welcome. She's come from Pune, and Dhruv. So, I mean, thank you so much for being here today. Yeah. Okay, why don't you come, give your experience, yeah.
Hi everyone, I'm Smita, and actually I stumbled upon the CEPT Prize, announcement. I was working at a place, at an architectural firm, and I just stumbled across this one day, and this theme seemed very uncommon to me actually, because it's not limited to architecture, is what I thought when I saw the poster. And yeah, it just sort of sparked something in my head that I like the fact that it wasn't supposed to be architectural even when CEPT is organizing it. And so I just started thinking about it, and I'm just so glad that my essay was selected here, because it's actually one of the first long form things that I've written. And yeah, the process itself, like I actually sort of clarified a lot of things while writing the essay, and yeah, it's helped me, and I think it's motivated me to write more. So yeah, thank you for the opportunity.
You can thank Tridip for it, because it was his idea to choose embellishment as the topic. Thank you. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Sure, just a little bit. Am I audible? Yeah. So, quite a few things. This essay prize was more of like, a journey for me to explore the meaning through writing for the first time, apart from, just taking a step back from the drawing board and realizing, what to do. And talking about embellishment, it was always a question about, again, what was said here, yes, no, maybe, what is right, what is wrong? Is subjectivity really something to be perceived? What is absolute? Is there any absolute or not? And how does one say something, something is kitsch or something is avant-garde? How do we, structure meaning to something? And by, it was something that was, I wanted to explore this realm where this natural tendency of a human being to make a decision if something looks beautiful or not has to be challenged, or is there a way to be just? And this is something that we as architects, designers have always said, do we need to embellish something? Do we need to plaster something? Should we actually show if it's good or not? So this was kind of a revelation for me. So thank you to Dip sir for having this as a topic. It was really interesting for me as well, and thank you for everybody at the front end and the back end of this competition. And thanks to the films and thanks to Abbas Kiarostami, I would say he's one of my favorite directors, who has changed my way of perceiving things. His film Close Up was something that made me change my essay 5 days before the deadline. So, okay. Yeah. All right, anyways.
Congratulations.
Yeah,
Thank
thank
you so
you.
much. Thank you for participating. Okay, so I'm terrible at formal conversations. I'm looking different at this. But yeah, yeah. But so Paromita, I mean, your talk was something that made me think about what my perspective. Now I'm also thinking of the maybe factor. Yeah, yeah. In one of your recent Instagram posts, you talked about a very interesting aspect of violence against women should begin by talking about pleasure. And that is a perspective which is something that we never really thought of, right? I mean, we always think of like the binaries that you said, which is either no violence or completely celebrate the woman, but then we never talk about this very intimate aspect that each one of us requires. And so can you just elaborate a little more on that, because that might hopefully change the dialogue about violence against women in the current world.
I mean, I think the conversation on violence against women always falls into this thing of you protect women from violence. And then it actually endorses the very conditions that fall with it. Because there's a hierarchy of gender which allows that violence to occur. And then if you say, I'll protect women from violence, I'm the good guy, then you're just saying that everything remains in a status quo. But the idea of pleasure is not only sexual pleasure. I want to clarify that. I'm using the term pleasure in an expansive sense to mean things that make us feel good, or things that we like. And pleasure is not always purposeful and doesn't always result in some good end. But I also do think that I feel that there is a possibility of violence in every intimacy. And so the assumption that there can be a world without any violence is simplistic. But to regard every person as capable of pleasure, and pleasure as something that we should pay regard to in life, that we should should give it a space of importance in simple ways, I think makes us think of every person as in their personhood, not in their identity. But if I have to, I think I'll give you a simple example that if I don't know you, my getting to understand what you like or don't like. For example, many people assume that they can be very informal with me because I have an informal aspect. Like my demeanor seems informal, but actually I am a very formal person. So I normally get very annoyed when people are instantaneously very familiar with me, right? And I think that the whole world of slightly trying to figure out what does this person prefer. They're learning about somebody's likes and dislikes, and that means you're according personhood, getting and giving space and accepting that you don't know everything about the other person not fully knowable, and that this has to be mutually executed. Right? So I think that doesn't apply only to gender. Obviously, it applies to caste, it applies to queerness, it applies to every hierarchy that the normative world has set up. So I think that violence can't be countered with more violence, right? Which is how we talk about that. If violence has been done now, either I will set right the person. It's interesting that Merriam-Webster dictionary today announced that cancel culture is one of the words of 2022. And what does that tell us about our internet? That we can only cancel somebody out, which is a violent thought, as a response to something violent that they might have done. So I think we want to look for the third possibility always.
It really brings a whole new perspective.
I just want to say also, that a film which I think does it quite simply and nicely is Monsoon Wedding, where there is actually a moment of love and acceptance that you cannot erase the violence that has happened. I read a wonderful interview with a woman who was abducted by her boyfriend and kept trapped, and I guess he was sexually violent with her, and he has never been arrested or found. And somebody asked her, what is your definition of justice being done to you? And she said, him being caught and put into prison, it may end some of my anxiety, but it won't be justice for me. Justice for me would be to feel happy in my life every day, which is hard for me. And there can be no recovery, because what I am before the violence, that's gone, because that violence is now part of my life story, right? So I think that how does one then respond to that moment of violence? Not by doing violence to somebody else necessarily, but by that act of love which Naseeruddin Shah does with Shefali Shah's character. I found it a very beautiful moment in that sense. It allowed us to think about responding to violence differently. And I'm just going to add that it occurred to me quite late that although I had this sucky youth and childhood that I described, but one thing that I did get, which I think helped me in my life, was that I came from a family in which pleasure was not discouraged. So you were allowed to read comics for a long time and waste time. We were encouraged to love music and asked what kind of food we want to eat and what colors we love. And I never realized that those very simple things actually created a means for me to navigate my life into a good place, because I believed that pleasure was important.
Yeah, so pleasure has always been associated with guilt.
Yeah.
And it's really nice to hear that, you are connecting violence, pleasure, in such a meaningful manner. Is there anybody, this is not a formal forum, so please feel free to share any questions, any thoughts, anything, right? So, questions, okay, yeah, sorry. Okay. Okay, questions. Yeah.
Thoughtful questions.
Thoughtful questions, yes. So, anybody would like to sort of share, because I can go on and on with her, and I tend to go on for the next 3 hours over dinner with her. But I think this is your space and your chance to sort of, I know when to come next.
I would like to ask a question of the audience, right? Like, for example, when you're online, because obviously there is a big part of this audience that spends not only a major part of their life online, but your life has been shaped by the online, right? So, is pleasure easy to experience? Pleasure in the way I'm talking about it. Delight,
simplicity, enjoyment, fluidity. Do you find it easy? I'm curious. Sporadically. So what makes it sporadic?
I think it depends on the source of where you end up spending your time, because I quite like the idea of you describing it as a polyglot existence. And because you exist in these different windows, it allows you, depending on which window you're living in at that point of time, to essentially get pleasure sporadically from that window and then move on to, say, a space which is not so much, and move on to a space which is anxiety-inducing. So I think, yeah, I would say it's about where you are in that landscape at what point of time.
I was actually thinking about it while you were talking, because I'm someone that very consciously avoids social media part of the internet, right? And at various points of time for marketing purposes, you know, like if you are a creative professional, then you need to get out there and talk about things. And, you know, she's my business partner and best friend for more than a decade now, and we have had this conversation so often. I think, and even in what she said about the sporadic nature of pleasure, right? And when you think about the online space as a landscape, are there wells and are there rabbit holes in that landscape, right? Because pleasure also brings with it an aspect of time. Because short-lived pleasures are, you know, fleeting. And
but you say that like that's a bad thing.
No, I don't say that. They are one kind of thing. And listening to you, I was thinking about even my approach of, you know, not being on social media. But at the same time, the most I know about your work is through social media as well, right? So while not being a part of it. So there's ways in which the social media breaks its boundaries and, you know, enters other spaces as well. And I like to explore those spaces much more, that, you know, where are the leakages of these landscape, right? Leakages of space, time, and therefore then what leaks through is maybe that, you know, the space of the maybe.
Yeah, maybe. Okay, now you have to ask a question, because I asked you all a question. Is, you know, see? I'm not so nice.
Regarding the pleasure in the context of social media, I've felt that it's very ephemeral. It's very short-lived for me, as in it gives me the kick of dopamine as a way of distraction, but nothing more than that. I felt that social media these days, the way normal videos are made about reels and marketing, is perhaps feeding a culture of looking at things very superficially, skimming through things perhaps, and perhaps not all things have to be skimmed through. And because of which I've felt that the pleasure that I get is perhaps mostly just looking at the content that I want to look at, but nothing deeper than that. That's the way I've seen social media.
I mean, I guess I'm just curious about the idea of fleeting being a bad thing or ephemeral being a bad thing, which I'm not sure it is. But I also do think that underneath it, there is the sense that it becomes the only register in which pleasure is allowed to be experienced, which is what is exhausting about it, right? That if one wants to submit to something, one can't. And I just wanted to share an interesting thing, that there is a website, or I guess it's a website. It's called Make Love Not Porn, and it's started by somebody called Cindy Gallup, where people upload their real life videos of having sex. And the idea is to see real world sex, as she calls it, and not porn, which is produced for you in a certain way, because porn atomizes the idea of what sexuality is. It becomes the only way in which people know sexuality. So actually there's a large incidence of young people not wanting to be sexual because they're experiencing sex, but not sexual pleasure, because there isn't actually any sense of narrativizing that social media allows you. Because I think that's the trouble with the fleeting. It's not that it's fleeting, it's that it's atomized. And so you can't make any connections between things somehow.
I also feel like because of social media and the fleetingness, I feel like pleasure has started to be more commodified than it was. And I don't know what the direct relationship of that is with pleasure, but I feel like it's going in the opposite direction maybe if we talk about commodification.
I mean, I think pleasure was always commodified. Like, I think that these are morally loaded words, that because it's commodified, it's bad. But Bollywood movies are commodities. We went and we consumed them with pleasure. I think that what is different now is that we are compelled to watch Monica, Oh My Darling, and told that it's pleasurable just because it's a listicle. It's not actually pleasurable because it's not sincere. It's only a pretense of pleasure, right? So that facsimile of pleasure in a way that, I don't think that it's that social media commodifies pleasure. I think that it turns pleasure into work. So for example, any leisure activity has to be immediately converted into a social media product, right? And it can only be done in a certain form. And hence, I think it makes everything purposeful rather than purposeless and therefore taking us into some enchantment.
Could you dwell just a little bit more upon what do you think the nature of this product is? As in, how does this product function? And perhaps what I feel is that making this product is looking at things as an object.
Which product?
As in the way you said that if you have pleasure, you need to, for it to be on a social media, it has to turn into a social media product. That's what I want to ask for. I
don't think I said that, so that's why it's a little hard to answer that question.
What did you exactly say? I'm sorry.
What did I exactly say? I'll
regarding
repeat what I
product,
exactly said. I understand. You grew up on social media. So, little comprehension problems. But the thing is that, attentiveness is love, right? So attentiveness is what social media takes away from us. Our capacity to attend to an entire narrative and understand it has become less. Hence our capacity to love things slightly reduces. Because that is a kind of abandonment of yourself somewhere. But what I said is that to live on social media, you can change things from the way in which social media productifies them by creating a different kind of landscape. And that you can use the language of social media to do something completely different on social media. So I don't think of it in a very nihilistic or a very predetermined way, that social media means X thing is going to happen. I don't believe that. I do think that people who come to Agents of Ishq, for example, do not experience it in the way they experience other social media. I know it. And that is what allows them to have these very private kind of exchanges which are very deep, which are very complex, actually. Yeah. Thank you.
These dimensions to non-binaries, and I think that's very important for us to, not just the younger generation, even us. You see, I mean, we didn't grow up on social media, but we are adapting to it, and I think that is something that even I so much. It was a wonderful lecture, and
Thank you everybody.
Firstly, thank you, Paromita, for this really wonderful, very provocative and progressive talk. Also, in a very short time, you were able to open up very many windows for us about inhibited conversations, thoughts that we don't talk about openly. And also, it was wonderful to see snippets of your work, very raw, very candid. And also, it's somewhat like a conversation that you could take many things from them. So it's a different language of filmmaking, so thank you so much for that. Please accept our sincere gratitude for being here at CEPT. Moving to everyone who has helped us or been a part of CEPT Essay Prize. Firstly, to all the participants who've applied for theme embellishments, thank you so much. To all the jurors, Tridip Shurud, Romi Khosla, Kazi Khalid Ashraf for selecting the winning essays. To all the reviewers, Rutul Joshi, Sonal Mittal, Kanika Singh and Katrin Danka for going through all the abstracts and making the essay selections. I also want to thank Kaivan Mehta, who was a committee member for the last 3 years, and for his immense contribution. Moving to all the departments, thank you to Communication Office, especially Poojan Vyas for the fantastic cover he did for Embellishments, copy editor Sudha Padmaja Francis, the printers Navjeevan Press, IT team, campus office for all their support, and of course Provost Office and Deputy Provost Office for their unflinching support throughout. Last but not the least, most importantly, Namrata, thank you so much for coordinating with all the departments and the team, and this has been the most seamless run, so thank you. Finally, from all of us, the committee members, Professor Seema Khanwalkar, Professor Srivatsan, who could not be here, and myself, Mansi Shah, thank you for attending and being a part of CEPT Essay Prize. Now we have refreshments, so please do join us outside, and see you all next year. Please do write the next essay theme. Thank you. Sorry? Make this? Yes, absolutely. Make the next theme popular. Please write for it. Share it amongst your networks. We absolutely would love to have many, many entries, and please do participate. So thank you so much for being here.